Want to drive faster? Listen in as Kinch Rendell, an SCCA National Trophy winner and multi-time Pro Solo champion himself, interviews the best autocrossers in the land. He talks fast and drives even faster. And now here's your host, Kinch Rendell.
This show features Ron Williams. He was your Solo Nationals champion in 2014 in STC and a Civic Si, near and dear to my heart. Actually, this year he's back in the class as STS and a CRX Si. In 2013, he joined RTA D-Stock Audi TT. So not officially a jacket class, but he won that as well. With lots of cars, I seem to remember. 2012 FSP and a Civic. 2008 H-Stock Mini Cooper. 2007 G-Stock and a Mini Cooper S. And in Pro Solo, he has 2 championships, 2009 in H-Stock and the Mini Cooper, and 2007 G-Stock, the Mini Cooper S. I'd like to mention that he owns and operates Southwest Auto Service in Topeka, Kansas. The number to reach him is 785-272-3232. I respect him and trust him enough that I sent my Civic out there this year, and he went through it and updated all kinds of things that I did not find, from loose bolts to the valve lashings, I believe, were off. So I trust him. Even though I compete with him, I still trust him. I trust his advice. I've talked to him for hours about his different thoughts, from the bushings, what need to change with the bushings that you usually buy for the Civics. So if you have a chance, I recommend using his services. Enjoy the show. Ron, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you. Ron and I have talked a couple times on the phone. I'm like, Ron, we have to record this. We have to get this knowledge out there on the Autocross podcast. So tell us, when did you start autocrossing? Actually,
the first time I actually competed in an autocross was probably I'm trying to think back here. It's a lifetime ago. But I think it was 86, maybe. I used to go to autocrosses all the time with my dad when he was in a Corvette club back in the 70s. And, I was just knee-high to a grasshopper, I guess, 6, 7 years old. We were going to Salina and going to all these Corvette club stuff. And actually, I was cruising down Topeka Boulevard and saw an autocross happening over at White Lakes Mall, and ran home, told the old man, and we just jumped in a car and went over there and gave it a shot. So that's the first time I ever competed in one. I do remember coming off course from the first run, and I couldn't even hardly hold the clutch in. My leg was shaking so bad. But I guess that happens to everybody on your first event.
So now I feel a little bit better realizing, like, man, this guy is fast. Why? And there's also hope, I guess, for my kids. If I keep them hanging around long enough, maybe they'll get hooked. So 1986, was it a Corvette? What was the first car?
Oh, gosh, it was Oldsmobile Forenza.
Yes, I might have to look that up and include a photo, because I'm not sure what that is. What year was that?
I think it was a brand new car at the time. I think they'd just gotten it a couple months before, but absolutely not a good autocross car. But you drive what you got to drive, and get one under your belt. Shortly after that, my dad had purchased a car that was supposed to be good at autocross back in the day, and actually somebody won a national championship in one, I think back in 1973, but it was he ended up picking up a NSU 1000 TT. And these are the best way to describe one would be like, it looks like an old BMW 2002, but actually smaller. And it's actually a rear engine car. With virtually no horsepower, but pretty good handling. And so anyways, he picked up one of those with like 5 spare transmissions and 3 spare engines, and that just seemed to be what you got with them back in the day. Everybody accumulated a whole bunch of parts because they didn't bring a whole lot of them over here to the United States. So we kind of picked that up and built it and ran it for that first season. And, the car did fairly well handling, except for it had virtually no horsepower. And we were running, I think when we got to Nationals, it was so bad off on the engine that we were running virtually on 2 cylinders. So didn't have much hope at Nationals that year. But we were trying to push it so hard in the corners. We pretty much put it up on 2 wheels about every other run. So it was getting a little dangerous at that point. So next year we went through the engine and had good fresh horsepower. I think we were up to the spec horsepower of like 67 or 68 instead of 39 or something like that. And first event we were going to drive from Topeka to Kansas City to go to an event. Fuel line came apart and burnt the thing to the ground.
Oh.
And that was the end of my autocrossing career for about 10 years. And so
nothing like taking a decade off.
Yeah. He didn't come back again until I had, sufficient funds to buy my own car and set it up, and didn't come back again. I think it was 94 before I came back and autocrossed again. So, that first season, probably got 7 or 8 events in, and then didn't do anything again for 8 or 9 years. So,
wow. So you mentioned building cars with your dad, and I want to thank you. I sent my car out to you to get it gone over mechanical wise. Is that what got you into doing mechanics? Being a mechanic, working on cars?
Yeah, pretty much. Dad used to tinker with, his cars back in the day, and kind of putting that car together. When you're 15 years old and you get this accumulation of a bunch of parts, and you got to sort through, what's still feasible, that's working, or what, is this part better than that part? You got to kind of go over and check everything over before you put it on the car, and throw away a bunch of time and effort. I mean, obviously there's tons of parts sitting around because it's, it's just an old beater with an accumulation of this and that. But, you kind of go through that and rebuild it top to bottom, and that's what we did. So, yeah, I guess in essence, that's what got me going in the mechanic side. So.
Yeah, and I can tell everybody, so I trust Ron enough that he's competing with me in the same class again this year after winning it, 2 years ago. And I sent my car to him like, Ron, please, fix the stuff. Just go over it. And he found things like, oh, we adjusted your valve guides. And those were not quite in spec and stuff. So I definitely, if you can get a car to him, if you're around him, hit him up for some knowledge and use him for business as well. So you came back in 1994. What did you start driving then?
I had picked up it wasn't too old at the time. It was actually and not the best car for the class either, but a 91 CRX DX. And I kind of picked that up as a daily driver, and I thought, I can get back into going to some autocross events. So rejoined FCCA at that point. I think I've been a member every year since. So quite a few under my belt at this point.
So in 1994, from then on, how many autocrosses or schools and such did you do each year? Thinking here to tell people how much you autocrossed to begin with, how you learned. Did you ride with people? What was the beginning for you for learning? I've never been to a school. My dad went to one when he was autocrossing fairly serious. I think it was 87. He bought a new car, and he ran it, campaigned it, all the pro solos, and drove across country. I don't think there was too many. I don't know if there were any national tour events back then. It was just like the Pro Solo Series was the one that you went around the country and chased the points, and that was the really top echelon of the solo community at that time was chasing the Pro Solo. But he had a car and did that 87 and 88, I believe, and but yeah, I've never done any schools. I just kind of listened to what the old man told me and what he learned from doing it, going to these schools, and kind of put that knowledge to use.
hardly ever rode with anybody, taking rides or anything like that. I just went to events and tried to go as fast as I possibly could go at each one. I'm trying to think how many. We did a lot of events early on. I wouldn't say we went every weekend, but I remember one year my wife and I did like 29 events, something like that. That would be the most. It seems like, anymore I get maybe 10 or 12 events a year. So, but then again, I'm going to international tours and pro solos and things like that, divisional events and everything in this area at our local club. We try to do everything 2-day events. So, it takes quite a bit of time for setup and course designs and taking care of this and taking care of that. And once you've been around it long enough and you're devoted to the local region and trying to keep it going, it takes a lot of time. So you don't get quite as many events, out of region. It seems like we're spending a lot of time trying to keep the local club going and do these little bit larger events.
Yeah, like I heard you made it out to Lincoln for their test, 2-day event a couple weeks ago. So that's another, I think, 2-day event, and you're saying your events are 2 days. Tell us, how many runs do you get each of those local events usually?
We try to do, at a local, we try to do 4 or 5. It kind of depends on how many entries we've got. But, yeah, we try to give people like 5 events or 5 runs,
And what do you recommend, switching over to kind of the mindset of testing or changing shocks or air pressure? Is that where you do some testing? Do you still do testing at this point, or are you pretty much set? Of course, you do have a car you just started racing for the 88 CRX this year. What's your mindset, or what would you suggest to people for testing and tuning at these local events?
I'm not one of those guys that's really good at that, switching things around and trying different things all the time. I think, I see a lot of people doing way too much of that and trying to, tune their shocks around, each course, tune their tire pressures around each surface course. I rarely change anything at all. If I change something, it might be, really try to concentrate on how the event went, what I wanted to get from the car. Did I get, what I thought I could get out of it? Is there something that I think is broken, needs to get fixed, or something needs to get changed on an alignment spec or something like that, or whatever? Or were we running, after 2 or 3 events, are we running too low a pressure or too high a pressure, and look at tire wear? But I usually do that over the course of, several weeks, several different events. Then I might change something. But, yeah, I see a lot of people change a lot of things, just so much so that they don't know what's working and what's not working. So
yeah, like your...
I try to just...
Yeah, I hadn't thought about your point of even tire wear. Do it over several events, because so many, at least courses I'm used to, you might have a lot of left-hand turns, so you're going to wear something unevenly because of that. And over several events, especially if you get on different surfaces, you might realize, oh, yeah, the car isn't handling as well, let's say making lefts or rights, so I should check the alignment. That's interesting. I like hearing that because I don't really check much very often, so that makes me feel a little bit better. I'm not missing the boat. I'm not changing something every other run like some people do. Whatever makes them, I guess, mentally happy, I guess they should keep doing that. I've noticed... go ahead.
There's a lot of people that'll come off a run and say, oh, man, the car it was stuck so good in the back, I couldn't get it to rotate, and I got to do, and then they're jacking the shocks around and changing air pressures and doing this and doing that. I mean, especially first run out on the course, not likely are you going to hit like the nth degree of the limit of the tires anyways, or hit all your points, exactly where you should. So, yeah, I like to go out and, this is what I'm going to set my tire pressure at during the day, and I'm going to bring them down to that after every run, and then and I might change that at the next event and see. But, usually, until I see 4 or 5 runs on the tires and see what they're doing, I mean, you have a really hard time knowing run to run what you're going to do different. So try to concentrate on your driving more than, putting the car in place and getting everything right, nth degree on your driving ability in the 4 or 5 runs that you have, because it's really not that much seat time. So I try to optimize my driving more so than changing something on the car. And if I do something different on the car, I usually change it between events, it seems like. So.
No, I like that. I also like what you mentioned about the first run. So it makes sense, especially in these front-wheel drive cars that I've mainly driven. You can't base anything off those first runs when your rear tires are cold. I mean, I guess I tell myself, if I ever thought, or if you are out there listening thinking, I'm going to adjust my shocks after that first run, probably not a good idea, because they're going to heat up and grip a lot more. I guess the only thing I would do in the past was start a little bit low on air pressure, hoping that would give me a bit more grip so it wouldn't be quite as loose, and then knowing it'll come back up to the higher temperature and thus pressure as well. But that's a great point about the first runs, especially. Why adjust something when everything's still cold?
Right. Yeah, I mean, it seems like, and it was more so with, your R competition type tires, that you could get a little heat in the fronts, and then the back was just drastically different on cold pressures versus like what we've got now in street tires. I mean, it seems like the street tires, if they're whatever the ambient temperature is, if you can get the rear tires to be even 10 degrees over ambient, it's sufficient to where the car doesn't, snap oversteer. Now, on our comps, it seemed to be more so that you had issues with rear grip on a front-wheel drive car with our comps. And I don't know why that is, but they just get a little heat in the front, and then the grip front to rear maybe was drastically different. But it seems like street tires are a little more forgiving in that first run snap oversteer type thing on a front wheel drive car. But yeah, you're not going to, and I don't know how many times you come off and go, man, I don't think I'm going to improve too much off the first run, and then you go off second run and you drop full second, so.
Well, I will admit there's been a year or two, at least one I can think of. My first run the first day led everybody after day one, and I was so ticked because, no, I didn't think that was my best run, and I kept knowing where I made the same mistake. Oh, yeah, even with cold tires.
You're just so much better. You're just so much better than everybody else. That's why.
Yeah, I've proven that every time at Nationals, right? Oh, no, that's maybe that doesn't happen to you, and that's something I'm trying to figure out. What is the mindset? How do I improve run to run? Can I walk the course more? We'll talk about that. But sometimes, even at pro, my first run or two on a side is the fastest, and I'm like, really? This isn't possible. Let's find something different, something to improve on. And other people look at me like, why aren't you concentrating more? Which that's my next question for you. I'm like, well, sometimes my first runs are the fastest. So it's almost like I need a blank slate in my mind sometimes to go out and drive fast again. So one time at Nationals, you were like, oh, yeah, the Civic you had, you're like, yeah, I think mine handled better the bumps and the bumpy lot out there than most of all these other cars. And you said you'd probably notice that. Oh, but you don't really watch the other people. So what are you doing when you're watching people, which actually I do sometimes watch. When you're sitting there watching the competition, what are you looking for?
I guess sometimes, if I'm at a deficit and it's like, and somebody's putting a half or 3/4 of a second on me, sometimes you can watch the course and see that, oh, they're flat in this area, or they're giving it up early so they can set up to carry speed through a certain section. I ran into that, and I learned this a long, long time ago. One of my nationals, I think it was 98. Was it 98? There was like a showcase turn that literally came all the way up to the grid at Ford's Field, and it had a big old arcing sweeper at the top of the hill that was just right up by the grid, which you never saw over there. I think that's like the first and only time they ran a course clear up there between the grids and had something in there. I think it was on North course at Ford's that, you know, people that were watching me were like, oh yeah, these guys are carrying so much speed up through this section, and you're dabbing the brakes coming in and losing all your speed, and yeah, that's where they're killing you. And of course, I corrected that one thing, come flying through there. I was like, holy smokes, you can really carry all this speed going up through this big old sweeper and then back down the hill. And then it went into a little 4-cone slalom down the hill. I carried so much more speed that the person that slalom it, you know, at like 6 or 7 miles an hour faster, and actually turned in and dinked a little cone, just a little early turn in, and you know, that one cone kept me away from, you know, my first national championship, because I was a half a second faster than everybody that run, and they were killing me the runs before that, and literally one big sweeper on one course can, you know, and people viewing that and saying that you're getting beat. I mean, that's something that you can pick up, you know, if you're at a deficit or something, or to look at the course and go, this is the one spot that, you know, they're carrying more speed than I am. I'm going to try that. So,
that's a good point.
Yeah,
and you also pointed out rev limiter. At least I thought of a rev limiter. That's something easy you can notice. Hey, someone's on the rev limiter there, and I'm not. I had somebody back in D-Stock days come up and tell me, Posey. It was Posey. He goes, hey, you're the only one hitting the rev limiter there. It's like, oh, okay, then I'm doing that section as well as I possibly can if I'm hitting it, or the only person hitting it or hitting it early. So think of that for other people that can hear those. In the Civics, honestly, I don't ever really hear my rev limiter. And also something I think about with that is watching brake lights. But when you're watching these brake lights, you better know if the driver's a left foot braker or a right foot, which leads me to ask you, do you use your left foot braking, right foot, or both?
Left foot. That's one of the things when my dad went to the school, you know, back in the 80s, it was, a lot of it was they were teaching left foot braking, and so, you know, he forced me to do it right off the bat. You know, it's like, go to the left foot, you know, and it's weird when you take off and you got to use your left foot to shift, and then you got to move it over, and then when you come back off course, you got to remember to, you know, move your foot back over. And it takes a little technique and a little time to learn that, but you learn it early on, and then, you know, it just makes the transition from throttle to brake, you know, much smoother. It doesn't upset the car as much. So it's kinder to the tires and tends to be faster. So, excuse me. But yeah, that's something I learned early on. And what's funny is when you do left foot braking, a lot of times you tend to use it as a crutch at some point. And I was doing a lot of that.
And give us an example of what you mean by a crutch. What would somebody notice if they're doing that?
Well, the left foot brake helps you a lot with car control. So if let's say you are running a front wheel drive car and you've got it set up to where it's a little, you know, it has a tendency to be loose in the rear, you know, you're going to drag the brakes, use the brakes more, because you can keep your right foot planted and put your left foot on the brake and just drag the brake instead of, you know, to control the car through some tight maneuver or, you know, something. But you know, a lot of people use it as a crutch in the fact that they're dragging the brakes in a lot of places where they should just be accelerating and fully off the brake. And I was doing that for a period of time. Somebody, you know, people kept coming up, well, we can't tell you when you're accelerating and when you're not because the brake lights are on the whole time, your whole run. You know? And I'm like, well, I'm just barely laying my foot on there. But if you know, it took me, I don't know, a couple of years of doing that. And one of my friends is like, I was running a car I'd never run before at Nationals, a CSP CRX. And it was at Heartland Park where it was fairly slick surface, and this car was set up really loose. And the guy's sitting there watching me from the stands, and he's like, well, I think you'd go a lot faster if you just accelerate and get your foot off the brake. He's like, I can hear you dragging the brakes, you know, through the whole corner. I'm like, well, the car feels like it's just over oversteering all the time. So, I was using it for a crutch, but as soon as I got off the brakes at that event, it like kind of clicked finally, It's like I was using it for a crutch for several years, trying to control the back end of the car. And once I got off the brakes and just used the throttle going through the corners, the car was a bunch faster. It had a lot of setup, a lot of, limited slip, all these things. And, but, it took kind of like, and again, it took somebody watching me and seeing that you're doing something wrong sometimes to make it click in your head and get it through to you. But he's like, yeah, if you just get off the brakes, you probably go a bunch faster, and voila,
Yeah, that's a good note. The last person I interviewed was Jason Frank, and he also left foot brakes, and he's driven a lot of these ST cars for many, many years now. So it's going to be interesting getting a hold of, let's say, Jeff Wong, who I know does not. So this leads me to the loose versus not loose car setup. You left foot brake. Would you overly set your car up to be loose because you do left foot brake, or no?
Well, what I find is, I don't know, I set the car up to just try to be predictable. I mean, you have to set the car up, a front-wheel car, a front-wheel drive car. It seems like you have to set it up, I would say, on the loose side. But you want it to be predictable. I mean, if you can get a smooth, slow, predictable oversteer when you want it, that's what I try to achieve. Obviously, a snap oversteer car is no fun for anybody at any time. But when you put somebody that drags the brakes a lot going into the corner, stays on the throttle, and then just really drags the brakes pretty hard, that they're usually reacting to a car that's been set up just stupid loose or a snap oversteer car, and they've run that for so long, so they use the left foot, to try to control that all the time.
Man, good point.
But you're not going to go faster if you're not accelerating. I mean, that's all there is to it. Most of these cars that we're running, 106 horsepower to the wheels or something. I mean, you got to keep the pedal in the metal and try to stay off the brakes as much as possible, or you're not going to get some good times on them.
I like that. So using the gas is the best. Using the gas plus the brake a little bit slower. Using only the brake, much slower. So you left foot brake, and one thing I realized I don't do as often as I think I should, do you have in your toolkit a lift? Are there times you just lift instead of left foot brake to get the car to rotate?
Oh, absolutely. We had a course at our divisional this last weekend that I set up, and it had some kind of wall and pivot cone type maneuvers that were, really top of second gear type things, where you're hitting them all at, like 55 miles an hour going through it. But it's one of those ones where you just initiate your turn, do a little lift, the car just starts to drift and hook, and then, that's all you have to do to get through a maneuver like that. So, yeah, there's times that you're not left foot braking at all, you're just doing a little lift. But, also decreasing radius stuff. You got a big sweeper with a decreasing radius on the end of it. That's another thing that you can come in and, do a lift kind of 3/4 of the way through the turn to get the nose point. And that's having a, good handling car that does what it's going to do what you think it should do all the time. And it has that, like, slow, predictable rotation I was talking about, that you can time things like that. If you don't achieve that, it's very, very hard to time anything, kind of off throttle lift type maneuver unless you've got a predictable car.
I hope you set mine up like that.
Well, there's a base things to do to get the car right, and then a lot of it has to do with, I wouldn't say shocks have a lot to do with it, but if shocks are not anywhere close to where they should be, then you're going to have, a difficult time with handling. I mean, obviously, sometimes you get lucky and somebody spent, like my car, I think I got pretty darn lucky on a set of shocks that were used, and they were working extremely well. But, who knows how many hundreds of hours David Whitener had on these shocks before to get them right. But I kind of got lucky that the guy took a set of shocks off of his CRX and decided to do something different. I don't know if he's going with the inverted Bilsteins that Whitener's using now, or what he went to. But yeah, I kind of got lucky with a set of shocks on that, and they've been working extremely well.
Yeah, that's where I've been. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, as far as setup goes, yeah, I set your car up exactly the way I set mine up, as far as making sure that the suspension's free and smooth and running through the complete travel, and it doesn't have any bind in it. That's a real critical thing to do.
You're saying that I had a little bit of bind before, maybe?
Well, you had some bind, and then you had a whole bunch of loose, and I think one of the bushings for the lower control arm was extremely loose on one side of your car. So.
Right, that's why I'm good, because it's predictably loose. No, that's so. One thing you made me of course, I lost my train of thought because I'm laughing about how bad my car was after you thankfully set that up. So you lift to also have the car rotate. I've only ridden in one Civic at the practice course at Nationals, and they would lift in the sweeper and it would rotate like you're saying. I was like, oh my goodness, that is weird. I guess I actually drove it as well. Yeah, I drove that one at least one or two times. I've never had my car set up like that. I've had tow out in the rear a little bit here and there, but that was the only Civic I gotten in that even in a sweeper you could just lift it and would kind of rotate very nice and slow. That I can see, like you're saying, that's nice to have as long as it's predictable.
And that's one of those things, going back to the left foot braking, and you and I discussed this a little bit before, that you might use it a little too much as a crutch, and instead of doing a little lift to get rotation, you're dragging the brakes going into a corner to try to achieve your optimal speed, and by dragging the brakes, it's controlling the car too much.
So,
you don't have the control to pivot the car because you're on the brake.
Yeah. So do you trail brake much in these front-wheel drive cars? Or are you trying to say you might not sometimes because you're going to get to rotate?
Right. You've got to pick what you want the car to do in a certain portion of the corner. That's the great thing about left foot braking, is you can be on the throttle, you can be on the brakes, you can be off the throttle and brakes. You can use both pedals to your advantage to put the car where you want to put it.
Yep.
So, but having a tendency to drive really hard into the corners and hammer the brakes, and that smooth transition off throttle and onto brakes, it doesn't upset the car mid corner because you're doing it with both feet. Sometimes that's you're better off just coming in and shedding a little speed, and then try to shed a little more by just lifting off throttle. It'll pivot the car, and then you can go right back to the gas. That's the hardest part about a front-wheel drive car, is it's got so much to do for the front tires. It's got to accelerate, it's got to brake, it's got to turn, it's got to do them all with one, the front tires only, that you almost need to get the car to do half the turning by rotating the rear.
Yep.
So
that's something David Falk had said way back when, and maybe it was also John Ames. If you can get the car to rotate without turning the wheel, keeping the wheel more straight, that's going to help you go faster. So whenever you're driving these courses, tell us what you're doing looking ahead-wise, and you might include what you're doing on a course walk. What are you planning for?
Well, I think it all really comes down to the course walk more than anything, and that's what I see people. I see people a lot of times when I'm out on the course walk, and they'll come past the cone. Let's say that they're setting up for the next, 90-degree turn, but there's a slalom, and then you're 150 feet, and then you've got a 90-degree turn. I see people come around the last slalom cone and literally walk 6 inches past it, and then all of a sudden they're 6 feet or 8 feet or 10 feet to the right of the cone. They're still 150 feet away from the corner, and they're already 10 feet beyond the last slalom cone, trying to set up for the turn. And, you know, I've had people just say, oh, I'm trying to over-accentuate what I want the car to do. Well, the thing is, though, anytime that you're in the car, I think you want to see, I mean, when you're walking the course, you want to see exactly what you want to see when you're driving the course. We're walking it at 5 miles an hour or whatever. We're going to be in a car going 45 miles an hour. You better see what you're going to, exactly what you're going to see driving the car when you're walking the course, is the way I see it. So if there's one thing I can tell anybody and everybody, it's walk the course exactly the way you're going to drive it in the car. Leave room for the car, whether you're going left or right side of the slalom and where your sitting position is, or if you're in a cart, you got to leave equal position left and right, but don't try to walk the course in a fashion that you can't achieve when you're driving the car. Because you want to see exactly what you're going to see in the car.
So well said. I notice the same thing. People walk, and all of a sudden they take a really sharp turn, and cars don't do that. They continue an arc pretty much, unless you're slowing down speed-wise a lot. They can't all of a sudden turn more if you're at the maximum grip. And then if somebody's doing that, and they're all of a sudden 3 or 4 feet to the left, they're now looking at things distorted. They can't get there. Or I'll often think they can't get there unless they plant their foot on the brake and slow down, and then they can jet over 4 or 5 feet. It's just not possible. And what you said about walk the line where you sit in the seat. When I walk down a slalom, I get close to the ones when I'm on the right-hand side and 3 or 4 feet off the ones that are on the right-hand side. That's why I'm doing that. And I even count my spacing now for slaloms based on the line I'm going to drive, not always just the distance between the cones in a straight line. So tell us, how many times do you walk a course, let's say, for nationals? Is it different for a local? Do you always do the same thing? And do you do the same thing for a pro solo?
Well, I got into, and this is another thing, like using the left foot brake as a crutch. Sometimes you just walk a course and drill it in your head so much, and I was finding myself, talking myself out of what I could do with the car, I don't know if you've ever done that, but, I would walk it the first time and go, oh, I can flat it here, I can do this and this, and then pretty soon, my fifth walk, I'm going, you know what, I don't think I can actually do that here, and then I end up driving slower. You've got to go, the guy that goes out there and gets on the nth degree of the tires and stays there 100% of the time is usually the guy that's going to be the fastest, or he's going to be pretty dang close. Obviously you're going to make some mistakes in a run. Everybody does. But that's the whole key. It's trying to get on the edge of the tires and stay there for the whole run, optimizing the grip that's given to you. And obviously your techniques of driving and your precision is also going to, tell how fast you're going to be. But yeah, staying on the edge of the tires, that's it. But yeah, I was finding myself walking the course too much, and talking myself out of, really getting on the edge of the tires. So I've kind of gone back to where, I'll walk the course 2 or 3 times, and maybe a nationals course, might walk it 1 or 2 more times than that. And oftentimes that's just because you've got lots of time to do it. But I really try to spread it out and go from course to course and try to get a different perspective on both courses, first, kind of get a base of what both of them look like, a couple times each, and then I'll concentrate on one, and then I'll go back to the other one, the night before or whatever. But yeah, walking the course too much sometimes is not a good thing. Now, if you're having difficulty remembering the course, that might be something where you're going to have to go out there and do it a little bit more initially than other people do. But the main thing about walking a course is really just trying to pick out, what's your next point, what's the next key cone that you're going to turn on, and block out all that extra crap. Most of the courses that we run have, 11 to 15 cones you really need to concentrate on. So trying to weed out all that extra information and concentrate from, I came from this point, now I need to look forward to, there's my next turn, and there's my next key cone, my next apex point. If you can concentrate on that, that'll get you looking ahead no matter what. It's like, that's the next cone I want to concentrate on. You go from executing this point to looking to the next point, and then weed out all the extra crap.
Lots of great points there. And I love that if you think about only 11 to 15 key cones, I'm at cone 2. Where's my third key point up here? Find it. That is great. And what you said about, I think you phrased it as talking yourself out of, I can't go flat here. I would do the same thing. I would walk a course and go, okay, I'm going to brake here. Okay, I'm going to do this there, especially the braking. I would tell myself to brake there, and then I would execute that for no reason, except that I walked the course and said, I probably have to slow down here. Instead of looking ahead for the next, let's say, key cone in your words, do I need to slow down here? There's my turn. Am I going to be on the right arc for that? So that's one reason I'm very much like you. If I walk a course 2 or 3 times, that's optimal in most every case. What I like that you suggested I might go ahead and try at Nationals or some tour event is walking both courses just to kind of get them in your brain and then focusing in on one. That would probably actually help me stay somewhat relaxed and not overwalk just one course. But I feel like at Nationals, I think there's been 1 or 2 of them where in the last couple of years I only walked them twice. Said I'm going to do this like a normal local event, which in reality sometimes, especially if I set them up or help, I walk them 1 time. And like you're saying, if you're more experienced, you kind of know how to look at the cones, so you don't have to memorize everything. But you're going to pick out those key cones. Or what I do is I pick out anything that looks a little confusing or a really key spot on the course. I go, that one I better concentrate on or I might mess that up. It sounds like very similar to what you would probably be doing.
Yeah, and that, it depends how good you are at imagery, I think. Some people can walk the course 1 time and get that picture in their head to where, it's almost like you come around a corner and you take a flash and you've got that image, you've got that picture there that, I've completed this segment, I need to go to this segment. That's kind of the way I piecemeal them together, so to speak. But I think also in doing that, it's like I said, I complete one section and try to do it the best arc, the best line, that, exactly the way I walked it. And obviously when you get on course, things can turn out a little different when you're, doing 50 to 60 miles an hour through something, but you try to achieve what you walk, and get to where you need to get to execute, your different maneuvers. But yeah, that's what I do. It's kind of like, when I'm walking the course, walk my line, come out of a segment, look to the next, I don't know what it might be. It might be 150 feet to the next cone that I need to pivot on, or slalom cone that's, it starts the slalom or whatever. But, then I get that picture in my head of that's the image that I'm looking for next. I'm through this maneuver, that's the image I'm looking for, and that gets me looking ahead on the course. Over the years, I don't know, I just have always done that, and been able to do that really easily. Like I said, I think it comes easy to some people and comes very difficult to others. But, all we can do is try to explain how we do it and achieve it and see if it helps other people.
Exactly. That's where some people may have different methods of achieving the same results. What do you think feature-wise you are best at or were best at to begin with? And that comes up to saying, what did you improve upon as well?
I don't know. I think I've always been pretty good at slaloms. You know, and you really have to have an attack mentality when you're doing a slalom. You've got to be extremely aggressive. Got to be on your toes, but yeah, I mean, if slaloms is where you can get a lot of speed. I don't think people really realize that, but I guess the best advice I could say is have an attack mentality when you come to a slalom. I mean, you should be attacking the backside of every one of those cones and turning the wheel just absolutely as fast as you can turn the wheel. Because usually the car can do it. If you can turn the wheel, the car can do it. If it's set up properly, obviously. And the narrower the car, the better. We were at an event a couple weeks ago, and my car was sitting in grid right beside a seat prepared 95. What is it? 95 Mustang. And it was just the view from behind, looking at the two cars in grid was just amazing. But yeah, the CP Mustang was easily 2.5 feet wider, and that makes a huge difference in autocross. So, but yeah, it just looked like a giant behemoth compared it to the lowly little CRX. But that gets you through the slaloms pretty quick.
So tell us more. Attack the backside of the cones. I like to tell people the first cone is usually the most important one to make sure you attack at the very least. Tell us what you think about braking. Do you fly into a slalom? Do you set your speed before you enter the slalom? What do you mean by attack it?
Well, I mean, you have to be really aggressive on steering inputs in a slalom. And, you know, there's people that'll come in and they'll drive through the slalom. They're not attacking the slalom. I think it depends on the slalom, and what the spacing is, and what leads to it, and, you know, how much speed you think you can achieve through that slalom. If it's a long slalom and you've got a grippy surface, you know, you might drive full throttle to the second cone instead of the first cone before you really start catching your rhythm in it. But, you know, it really comes down to how much speed you think you can achieve, you know, through it. And, you know, if you screw it up the first time, obviously you can, you know, drag the brake a little earlier, you know, between 1 and 2 or something, and then catch your rhythm there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just depends on the length of the slalom, the speed of the slalom, of how you drive into it. I wouldn't say that the first cone is always, you know, where you need to set your rhythm out in it. You know, sometimes, you know, you've got a really lengthy slalom that's not that difficult, especially if you've got a small or thin car, that you might not, you know, you might just drive completely past the first cone and catch the rhythm instantly on the second cone and be able to just darn near flat through it anyway. So, you know, it really depends on the length, the grip level of the surface, and so on and so forth, where you need to, you know, pick that point. But that's one of the key things is if you screw it up the first time, remember that. You know, I've screwed up. Here's where I screwed up. Come off course and go, oh, I went in too deep in the slalom here, and I didn't brake until I actually nosed past the second cone in the slalom. I need to, you know, I screwed it up. I lost my rhythm, got behind. Put that in your head. When you come off course, correct that one thing. And then where do you feel like you were too slow? Correct that. Go faster where you think you know, pick it apart.
Is that what you do when you finish a run? You come back and just make a mental list of several things?
Yeah, that's what I do. I mean, I get off course, and it's like, man, I was just way too slow here. And this chicane that I thought was going to be tighter than it was, and you can flat that easy, you know, or I broke way too early here, you know, and it may not. It feels like it's way too early sometimes, and it might be 5 feet.
Yeah, exactly.
But, you know, that's what I do. I get off course, and it's like, oh, yeah, I blew the slalom over here, went into it too deep and then got behind, and then I, quarter tank slapped it for the first two cones, whatever. I mean, you just make a mental note, but try not to change all the stuff you did right, Some people, when they come off and you say, well, you were too slow here, you were too fast here, the car pushed way out to the wall, whatever, they might go slower everywhere, It's like, don't try to change things that you did right. Just change the little things that you did wrong. So,
I totally agree. I used to be better at that. With the Integra, I think I'd put the windows up and just sit there. Like, no one talk to me. With co-drivers, I'm like, oh, wow, now I've got somebody else. Okay, jump out, get things switched over. But I do like the idea of sit there and find, at least for me, 2 or 3 things. Do I like that? Can I do that better? Oh, yeah, I can hit my brakes a little bit sooner or later there. Or look over there on that turn that got me a little bit. So thank you for the slalom advice there. That's great stuff. Have you had your wife co-drove with you a lot? Do you not like co-driving? What are the benefits? Any drawbacks?
Well, she would say it's a lot better when not driving with me, I'm sure. But I always enjoyed having her around. But I always loved having her going with me and being with her and enjoying that. I'm not sure that she enjoyed it all that much. She was around and did it for a lot of years, but I don't think she's missing it a whole lot. But sometimes I'm just not the best coach, because it depends on the individual and what they can take away from what you tell them. And some people like that aggressive in your face. This is what you did. This is what you need. Because a lot of times I can just sit there and watch somebody run and say, I saw you lost time here and here and pick apart the run just from watching them. And she didn't like that so much. It's just like, I get it like fresh off the course. I'd come in and start talking to her right away, and that's probably the last thing she wanted. But it just depends on the individual and how they want to do it. Some people come off course, like I'll come off course and I'll go, I did this and this. And then, usually when you got somebody standing around that, co-driver or just your friends sitting there watching, you can kind of pick apart your run with them and say, I just really didn't think I did this section all that well. I think I can carry more speed there. Or I got behind in the slalom or whatever, and just discuss that and just put that mental note in your head that those are the small things that you need to correct on the next run, and really not to change anything else that you did right. So,
yeah. Have you done any data acquisition? Looked at any data with anybody driving with you or driving other cars?
I never use it. I don't know if that's just I'm not that tech savvy enough to, get on a computer the second I got off the course. I see a lot of people doing that. Matter of fact, Dave Green, one of the Corvette drivers from Wichita, I was talking about his run a couple weeks ago in Lincoln, and I said, man, you just had so much more speed coming in at this point, and then I saw you pick up the throttle, and as soon as you did, I'm like, I knew you weren't going to make the next section. And so he pulls out his phone, and he's like, nope, I was doing the same speed here. And I'm like, well, you can throw away your device. I don't care what it says. I thought. But he's like, nope, I was going the exact same speed. You can see these things crossing right here. I was like, okay, whatever. But, yeah, he's got this stuff on his phone to where he can, like, map out every 10 feet or something and figure out how fast he was going and where he made his mistake or whatever, and analyzes that every run. And I don't know. Yeah, I try to just do that in my head and not use a device. So
yeah, no. Even though I'm tech savvy, I'm not. That's Solo Storm I think you're talking about, which especially co-driving with Salil, we want to do more of that. But once again, it does take the time afterwards or between runs. But what I like hearing is you have championships and you don't do data acquisition. You don't break down your runs that way, you have another method of mentally going, oh, I could have done this better. I could go faster there, a little bit slower here. So different things work for different people, and you've been very successful without it. So that's good to hear.
Well, I don't think and that's another thing. I don't think it really should be part of the sport. That's a kind of a part of the sport that, it's kind of like 3 runs and done type of thing at nationals. It's the difficulty level of the sport. And having that to where you can pick apart everything you did in 45 seconds, between runs, and I don't know, and see something on the computer that you couldn't pick up on your own. I wouldn't say that it's cheating, but I don't know. I just think part of the sport is being able to improve yourself in those 3 runs that you get by yourself.
Yeah. True, and since I've not been doing that lately, I wish no one was. But realizing after doing several of these interviews, some people have people that break down the data for them in between runs. And I'm like, oh, my goodness. I'm not sure if it'll help me, but I'm thinking I need to almost try that to have a clue. What I found from TrackMate years ago was, hey, a tighter line actually worked and saved a ton of time in that section. So mentally, I kind of feel like I paid $1,000 back in the day to learn that. But at this point, some people really do believe they're going to improve quite a bit by doing that. So it's something I was hoping this year to actually get working in the car. It's something that didn't work all of last year that they put in the car, but we never got it figured out. What I think is best is maybe not for the top driver, but for if you have somebody that's slower in your car, it's going to benefit them greatly if you can say, hey, look, the data shows that you are slower by a second through the slalom because you went extra distance. It is amazing what they can do, but it's also amazing how many people can get that data, even from other drivers, and look at that and compare it to their runs after their runs.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I do and my friends do is oftentimes we just sit there and watch, and we can see, when you're talking, it's like me and Greg Reno and Craig Wilcox and Sean Hill. I mean, we sit there and we watch each other and we try to share information back and forth, and I don't, I know Craig's used some data logging and I think Sean did back in the day when they were running the H Street Mini. But I don't know. I've never used it. I hardly ever do any video, and I think I guess this is just me and my opinion, but I think if you want to log your information and put a camera on all your runs, and then after you're done competing, you want to go back and see where you can improve for future. But, I think when you're in the heat of the battle, so to speak, that day, checking information between runs, I don't know. To me, that's just, I'm not sure if you'd call it cheating. I just don't think it should.
I'm going to try to do it this year, and I'll even share with you, though. I'll try to confuse you. That's what I'm wondering also is, just like changing shock settings or something else drastically or at all between runs, which I don't do, I'm wondering if I can use this, or will it be something that distracts me? So what I'd like to tell people out there is, whether you do this or not, does it truly help you? Can you go back and look at the data and prove that it helps? I've not noticed by watching video, I can't remember the last time I ever looked at video between runs, to say, hey, did this help or not help? But I can imagine nowadays at a pro solo, you could look at you always have one. You could look at your first run versus the previous session's runs and say, hey, yeah, I went faster or slower here or there. I mean, that's how amazing at this point with the computers and stuff. You can do that sitting in there for 30 seconds to a minute or two between runs. So, yeah. Oh, tell me this.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I was kind of surprised at how, going back to Dave Green, he could actually, kind of pinpoint in on a certain little bitty section of the course and then pull it up to a wider expanse and look at that and see his speed and see his angles and
he sees his line too. That's the biggest thing at least from the TrackMate. If you can see two sections or two runs over one section, which one's fastest? If you see the line, you're like, oh yeah, I went too wide there. And you can then see the speed. As he drags, he sees the speed between those two runs everywhere they go. So it is truly amazing. You mentioned one time you thought there was a mindset difference, or you have a different approach maybe from a pro solo to nationals. Do you remember mentioning that, or what you were thinking about then when you said that?
I guess I'm not understanding. You say I have a different approach to doing pro solos versus solo nationals?
Yeah, I think it was as simple as you were saying there's a mindset difference. I'm pretty sure that was after I think I won the pro solo for the class that year, and then you spanked us in at solo nationals. And I thought you'd mentioned, there's a mindset difference here.
There is, because, the pro solo, you get a session, and you're just looking for the nth degree run at any one time. It doesn't matter if you do it the first session or if you do it the last session. You get 3 separate opportunities to combine, a right side run and a left side run to be the fastest in pro solo, I guess. Where when you come to solo nationals, solo team nationals is, you get, and it's very rarely that you only get 3 runs. So, it puts a little more stress on you there as well, that you've got to get it done. Got to get it done in changing conditions, and just got to go out there and blast it 100%, and just go for it. But yeah, I think there's a different stress level there for solo nationals comparatively. So obviously, there's different things about a pro solo that's more stressful. You're running head to head against somebody. You got drag strip starts, and you got the light as part of the competition. So, but yeah, they're 2 different animals. There's no doubt about it.
I'm still trying to figure them both out, I think, at times for sure. So take us back to what's some of your favorite cars you remember? What cars stand out to you that you had fun? I've had fun in I don't know how many cars I've even driven over the years. 20. I mean, I've competed in at least 20 different cars over the years, and oftentimes different classes. I don't think I can even remember all the classes that I've run in. It's been a bunch. But yeah, back in the day, it was like always trying to find the fast H Street car. And I bet I've been in H Street in like 6 different cars. But I don't know. The 05 Mini I really liked, especially running at Heartland Park in that car. I mean, it really, I don't know. You could drive it. I mean, as fast as you could turn the wheel, it would do whatever you wanted it to do. And on a slick surface like that, and having that kind of precision, it was a lot of fun. Of course, both the street touring cars are just stupid fun. But what's funny is the slower cars a lot of times are what are a lot more fun than the cars that have a lot of power. And I think people look at the sport and go, I got to get something that's got, I want to go faster, so I'm going to get something that's got 100 more horsepower. And that's not what solo is about. I mean, we've got so many transitional elements and corner link to corner link to corner. I mean, grip level has just virtually everything to do with it. And then a lot of it's size of a car. And I think it takes a long time to realize that the smaller, the narrower the car, the faster you're going to get through these elements in solo, at least. So, but yeah, I've always had a lot of fun in the slower cars you make go fast than the fast cars that you make go fast. So, yeah. So what keeps you in H stock or these front wheel drive cars? You said they're a lot of fun, like the ST cars. What keeps bringing you back to it?
Well, I went back to street touring, I think for 2 reasons. I think the street touring, when I was in the street touring compact, I mean, camaraderie is one of the things in the class. I mean, having everybody in the class that has super similar cars, and you're fairly restricted in setup to where it's, I guess you could say it's almost like a spec class, but you got some innovators out there that change that once in a while. But yeah, having similar spec type cars and having come down to driver technique, that's the type of class I've always enjoyed. And of course, I always like making the old slow car go fast. That's more fun to me than anything else. But yeah, these street touring cars are just so much fun. For a car that doesn't accelerate much and to go so fast in the corners, even on street tires, to me is a lot of fun. And then having the longevity of the tires. I mean, I wasn't, I was like everybody else. They'd been on our comps forever. And, the current generation of street tires is actually pretty darn good. And they last a fair amount of time, too. So that's kind of nice to me. I drove the H Street and G Street Minis for several years, and we couldn't get 30 runs out of a pair of Hoosiers on the front of that car. I mean, if you were doing some asphalt runs, you might get 35.
Oh, yeah. In the Integra, after 12 runs or 16, we didn't want them on the front of the car anymore.
Yeah, you go to, like, Blytheville, and if you didn't have a fresh pair of fronts, you weren't making it through the Pro Solo, especially if you get into the challenge. You'd go from full tread tires to fully bulb tires in like one event. So it's really nice to get on, like, the street touring category, because you can go out and take those extra runs, take fun runs at the end of the day. We would never take fun runs in the Mini, because you're just eating away tires off the front of it. So, it's been a joy to get in and get some fun runs again and get some extra seat time. So that street tires have definitely helped that for me.
Yeah, and that's where people also are much more likely to let someone else drive their car and not even think, hey, this is going to cost me $20 if I let you have 4 runs in the car. I found that happening more and more on these street tires. Oh, and something, this has maybe become a crusade for me. I think if we had a Civic CRX class and a Miata class, you would have 50 or 60 cars showing up to nationals. And I'd even go so far as to say, okay, for all these Civics, you can have a minimum weight that's higher than, let's say, what my car is to make it where most of the cars could get there. I think that'd be a home run, because some of the Miata people get disgusted and go, oh, we can't compete with those. Everybody, or a lot of people having Civics said, oh, now we got CRXs, might as well buy those. I'm just like, this is crazy. If you want to have really popular classes, once if you split those, I think you would have a ton of people in both classes. And like you're saying, what drew me to this class was the spec nature of it back when it was only Civics. I was so drawn to that. I'm like, I don't have to worry about them putting the next new car in the class, like the Audi TT, and going, okay, now I can't compete anymore. That's a huge draw. I'm hoping at some point that makes sense to more people, and they're not going, you ST people just want more classes. I just think it's great when you have a class that you can tell us what your other Civic cost that you won in, but for $5,000 to $6,000, I think you have a very competitive car that you can get a set of tires, and if you don't race a ton, can last you the whole season.
Yeah, I agree 100% there. And that's why, I guess if you look at it, the street touring classes are at this point are just dominating everything. And the people that are in the sport and have been there for a long time, I don't know if they really realize that they're getting into that. But once you get into it, I think you figure it out. But yeah, that's the great thing about these classes is preparation level, and everybody gets to do the same thing. There's hardly any engine modifications, so it's all suspension and wheels and tires and that kind of thing. But yeah, they're a load of fun, even though you don't get a bunch of engine mods. But keeping that away, I think, has really helped. But yeah, it's always kind of enticing to me to because I was in the stock classes for so long, to look at the street classes nowadays and go, yeah, I'd really just like to drive to the event on the tires, run. I did that last year, but like you said, man, every couple of years, you've got to just go through everything, try to find out what's the next new car, and stuff's moving around so much between classes, you can't hardly keep up with it. And I think the fast track, man, if there's one thing that I would do away with, it's the fast track. And this crap about changing. You know, if you come out with a rule book in January and come February, you got to change a whole bunch of rules and move cars around and do this and do that. I just think that's ridiculous. But make the rule book once a year, and if you want to make proposals mid-year for next year or whatever, fine. Get a full year input on it, and then decide what you're going to do for the next rule book. But this thing changing every month, and people got to log into that. That maybe I'm just lazy and I don't want to keep up with that kind of stuff. So,
I know I'm not distracted by those things, I guess. But now that you say that, if I'm in a class and they change my rules once the season's kind of begun, I guess in the new year, that is a little crazy. Especially they move a car around. Like, oh, yeah, now I need to go buy that.
Yeah. Yeah, and so, like I said, it seems to be enticing to me to go back to that, because it's simpler. But it's not simpler. When you look at it over the course of 3 or 4 years, it ends up costing you more money, more setup time. And every time that they move these, I'm not sure that these events boards are looking at, the expense of what they do when they move these cars around so much. So.
Oh yeah, that's it would be nice if things were kind of set in stone for a amount of time. But even needing to go get a different car after 2 or 3 years, I found that I really like sticking with a car for quite a few years. And that's why I think even with the Civic, I still am happy that I think it's competitive. It's competitive with Miatas. Hopefully it's competitive with CRXs. That was the big draw. I was like, wow, I can go there. I don't have to worry about so much churn. And it hasn't been a ton since I've been there. So some of these wrap-up questions are, if I give you an open checkbook that actually has lots of money in the bank account, what build of a car would you do?
I'm not sure I'd do anything different than what I just did, which is build the CRX for the class. Like I said, there's like you've mentioned, that the rule stability is extremely nice. I mean, if nothing else, it's peace of mind that you're not going to be uncompetitive in a year or two. But yeah, that just having rule stability is fantastic. But yeah, I don't think that, I love taking a lovely little CRX that's not very fast in a straight line, and you're running the same times as a super street car or whatever. That's always to me a hoot.
Oh, we need to outrun Super Street, by the way, just in case you didn't notice that on PAX.
Yeah, isn't that great? But you've got to be comparative with a car that's got 12-inch wide wheels and 500 horsepower, and you've got to do it with 106 horsepower CRX or whatever.
Having driven the GT3, I will be impressed if there's ever a course we can raw time that car. Even if you try to set a course up to raw time that car, I guess you would make sure there was never an acceleration zone, but I'm not convinced it can't do a slalom better than the Civic. I'm really not.
That it doesn't slalom better?
Yeah, I would be hard-pressed to find anything it cannot do better, which kind of makes sense when a car's that well made.
Yeah, $140,000 car.
Yeah.
But yeah, I not having the opportunity to drive anything that extravagant, I couldn't tell you.
Okay, somebody out there, please get Ron in your GT3, or GT4.
Yes, somebody needs to get me in that car. Yeah. Now I had a lot of fun in Lotus Elise a couple weekends ago, and that was a lot of fun. And even it was street tired, and yeah, that car was a hoot. That was a lot of fun on street tires. So, never knew you were on street tires for sure. It's kind of like the street touring cars. You don't know you're on street tires. It's like you're on our compounds again, really.
Yeah, they're set up well for that. That reminds me, in FSP, you were driving, I believe, the Civic, and it broke, and you hopped into the 2002 and scared the bejesus out of Kevin because you hopped into that car and drove it really well. Can you recount that Nationals for us?
Yeah, I would say that was probably the most fun Nationals I've ever had. I mean, you talk about the camaraderie and friends and competition, and it was just all wrapped up into one. I had a car that my Civic spun a bearing at the Pro Solo, and I took the pan off and cleaned everything out and replaced the bearing but come to find out about a quarter of the way through my solo run for Solo Nationals, I realized that I was down about 35 horsepower. And by the time I came off the course, it was knocking real bad again. But, I went out on that first run and I, knew I had a damaged car, but you're there. You try to do what you can do to fix it and see what you can get by with. And, I got about a quarter of the way through the run and I'm like, oh my God, this car is so slow. It's scary, but it's an FSP car, so they're slow. They do handle well. So, I just tried to optimize my grip and keep it planted everywhere I could keep it planted. And luckily enough, I came off that run, even with the engine knocking and everything. I think I was only like a 3 or 4 tenths deficit, maybe 3 tenths, to the final run of Kevin Wenzel that day. So, and I think we both had, a little over a second and a half or something to the rest of the field. So, but luckily enough for me at that point, Kevin didn't have a co-driver, and he was nice enough to, even knowing that I was pretty darn close in time, that he let me get into a nationally competitive car and run it with him. So, actually the car was quite good. The only thing that I noticed right off the bat, it was much narrower than the Civic. So this goes back to skinny cars. You don't realize how, even with the tires sticking out ungodly amounts on that car, it was still crazy narrow compared to the Civic. I think it might be 3 or 4 inches narrower overall than the Civic was. So that's the first thing I noticed. It slalomed really well because you didn't have to maneuver the car a lot. But, I watched that car a lot over 2 or 3 seasons, and I just realized just by watching it that it just had just loads and loads and loads of mid-corner grip. So I kind of had it in my mind, what I thought I could do with it. And we discussed it a little bit. But, being in the same realm as Kevin, at that event, it was a heap of fun because I think even till the last runs I had the lead. It was switching back and forth every run. I'd chop off a half a second and he'd chop off the half a second, so he was 3 tenths ahead again, and we just kept going back and forth, and I think putting that pressure on him was just the most exciting, most fun part of the whole event. But to come out even in second place and feel so good about that's I was just grinning like crazy after the event. Even coming in second, it was like, shit, that was a lot of fun. So
yeah, he said that. And when he's on here, he's already agreed to be on the show. I'll ask him to recount as well, because I remember him mentioning some things about that. It just, I was also amazed, like, wow, he hopped in there and he was fast. Ron's a great driver. He can just front wheel drive, rear wheel drive. It doesn't matter. He can hop in there and go. And I love what you said. You had so much fun probably just from the competition, the camaraderie, the challenge of it, and you hopped in there and you were competitive.
Yeah. At the end of the day, you're hanging in there, and you made them work for it. You can't ask for anything more than that. So.
Yeah, nothing like no pressure for you. Here, Kevin, have a little pressure. And from what I heard, other people were lopping that on him like the night before. Why are you letting him drive your car? You realize he's pretty close to you. He's a great driver. So he got to have what you just said, all that probably extra adrenaline and thoughts of, oh, wow, yeah, what did I do? Oh, first run, he's fast. Oh, so that, but coming out, he still wins, and now he has that under his belt of, well, I can deal with some pressure there.
Yeah. Well, I'd put even more on it. I don't know if you've ever driven that car before.
Yep.
But the big thing about that is, like, the thing comes off the corners like gangbusters. It's got, good torque off the corner, but it's kind of got flat up top, I guess you'd say. It's a 50-year-old technology and doesn't have the VTEC yo like I had, so it didn't have any top 10 power, but so you just womping the pedal, it's like, oh, it came off the corner, great. For God's sakes, go. Move now, So you push the pedal harder, and of course the pedal won't go anywhere. But on that car, if you push the pedal too hard and pivot it to the right, I guess there's like a ball in a socket deal that it sets on. And if you push it too hard or pivot it to the right, that pedal dislodges.
Oh, that's right. I have heard that. It didn't happen to me.
So anyways, I came off my first run, didn't realize that would happen. So Kevin goes out on his first run. He doesn't get around the first corner, and the pedal falls off.
Oh!
So he's got to stop on course, go clip the pedal back into place, and then continue on his first run. So, he gets back in, and he goes, yeah, I forgot to tell you about that, but the pedal will fall off, if you roll your foot to the right or whatever. I'm like, oh, crap. So, I just screwed up his first run at Nationals.
You're like, thanks, Kevin.
A lot of extra pressure on him. It's like, thanks for the co-drive, but here, face this. The fact that he lost one of his 3 runs at Nationals, that was another thing that wasn't...
oh, wow.
So...
and I have to mention, that car is most likely for sale, so contact me if you would like to maybe have a very fast competitive FSP car that is just sitting out here in Colorado at this point. I did get to drive it once, and I actually spun it into a timing light of all things, and it took me a good 10 minutes to think, how did that happen? And finally it hit me. I was like, this is not a Civic. You can't just plant your foot into it and accelerate through a slalom. I mean, literally, I was like, how did this go wrong? I could see the finish lights, and somehow I ended up spinning at them and hitting a light. It's a different car. It's not front-wheel drive. You can't plant your foot everywhere.
Yeah, they're different, but I don't know. I thought it fallen extremely well. I was surprised. If there's anything that really surprised me was that about that car. I knew it would sweep her like crazy because I watched it on course, I don't know, a bazillion times, but to slalom that car, and then I'm like, how in the world did that car get through that tighter slalom? I think that year you came right off the start, took a right at the top of the hill on the east side, and then went down like a 5 or 6 cone slalom that was fairly tight. And the car did it with ease. And, like I said, I came back and I'm thinking, man, it really did the slalom much better than I thought it would. And it comes down to width a lot on those cars. If you really want to get through a slalom, that extra inch makes a big difference. We were discussing with the CSP, McCabe and Hunter, and then this weekend, they were like, well, we've got 15 by 11s we can put on the car. I said, well, can you tuck anything more to the inside, or are you maxed out? Oh, no, we're already maxed out, so we can't put the wheels any more inside. I said, well, that's going to add 2 inches to your car.
Yeah, but you have to move that much weight back and forth in every slalom cone and that much further away from every cone.
Yeah, 2 inches wider overall width of the car, because because you're putting exalt rim. So is it going to be an advantage? Probably not. When I did the 9s versus 10s on the Civic, the 9s were always a tinge quicker, and the 10s always made me hit cones. You know, it's just an extra 2 inches of track width. It's going to cause you problems. So.
Yeah, we found that on the FSP Sprint, that the 13x10s, well, scrub angle, scrub radius, whatever, you could barely turn the wheel. But it just didn't work so well. The little bitty 8s or whatever we have that we put on there last couple of years or last year, much better. The car is so much narrower. A big, big difference.
Yep.
So this is the final question, although you can add more thought to anything you'd like. If you could drive anybody's car out there, whose car?
Any car out there in solo, huh?
In solo, anybody's car. I won't tell you whose car is winning.
Is there a car that's just leaps and bounds ahead of everything else? Huh?
Yeah, it seems like. I think it's at least 50% of the show, the people so far. But that's okay. You need to be your own self. You might want to drive a 19 whatever Mini Cooper original. I mean, I almost expect you to pick a front wheel drive car. No pressure. Could be Stronex RX-7. Might be CSP Miata. Might be an STS Miata. I'm purposely not saying some of the more popular cars.
I'm trying to think what would be just, you know what, I would pick probably Brian Kuehl's, if he's still got it, that CRX Street Mod front. I would probably do that just for the fact that it's got ungodly amounts of horsepower, but it still handles fantastic. I would probably pick that and do Street Mod front. If I were to do like a rear-wheel drive car, I don't know. You know, that 914 Porsche is pretty awesome. That would be cool.
What class is that in?
Is he running? It's not E-Mod, is it?
Oh.
I'm trying to think what that. No, F prepared.
Okay, white, that's what I was wondering which one you were thinking about. I wasn't picturing it. I'm still not. All right.
But I don't know. I don't know if I'd pick a front-wheel drive car just because I'm used to front-wheel drive, but I think that car would be a lot of fun. The Kuehl CRX, the 914 would be a blast. I mean, you walk up beside that car and the roof line's lower than your hip. That center of gravity is insane. It would be a lot of fun. So I don't know, something like that. Always wanted to run like an FP Datsun. Gotta love the sound of those. And that's a really narrow car, you know. That's why they work so well. One of the reasons they work so well. But yeah, there's a lot of cars out there that would be a hoot. But yeah, I'd probably do Street Mod front.
So everybody listening, if you have a narrow car and you want to get somebody really fast in it, Ron's probably the guy that you should say, hey, please come hop in my car sometime. Maybe even fly him out just to, drive your car with you. You can collect data. Just don't tell him about it. Just collect it and look at it later. And you'll see, wow, he is fast, and this is why. Ron, I thank you for the time. It was great. Thanks for the extra time as well, because we went even over an hour.
Amazing. Yep, I appreciate it, having time to talk with me, and I hope it enlightens somebody.
It'll enlighten lots. Tell us I'll put this in the show notes as well. Where are you located? How do people contact you shop-wise? You can even give the phone number, etc. Anything you want to give out?
Okay, well, I'm Ron Williams. My shop is Southwest Auto Service, and I just, most of the time, repair normal street cars, 99% of the time, but I can work on your race car to go through the suspension or whatever you need to do. I'm not a tuning or dyno expert, but if you want the suspension or something gone through or just normal repairs, I can do that. I'm located in Topeka, Kansas, so pretty much midway to everything in the northern United States, so you can drop it off on your way by to something. Phone number is 785-272-3232. You want to get in touch with me. So
Ron, thank you so much once again. It was fun. And I will see you here in, about 2 weeks, I guess, at Spring Nats.
Yeah, you got to get registered first. I was on there looking.
Well, since I don't have any Bridgestones, why even register? No, I will. I'll probably bring the old Stones and new Rival S's. If I end up driving on Rival S's after not really loving them, this is going to be hilarious. I'm like, okay, let's figure out these sloppy-ish tires.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll be fast on whatever you got. So.
I hope so. That's the hope. With all those great drivers showing up there, I'm like, wowzers, this is great. This is going to be fun. We'll figure it out real quick.
Yeah, that's the fun thing about Spring Nats. It's always got a good competition on it. So.
Yeah, and we've got a great ST class this year, that's for sure. So you're back in it. Wong's back in a competitive car. Frank's going to be there.
Yeah, it's going to be a monster. I don't know how many we're going to end up at Nationals, but if it doesn't eclipse last year, I'd be surprised. So,
plus all the Miata guys that are fast. I've got to get to know more of them, get them on the show as well, get their thoughts.
Did you see the ex-Hollis Miatas for sale?
No. Oh, who has that now?
I don't know who owns it. I saw it in Grassroots Motorsports. It's that white 19 Miata that Hollis had built several years. It's been a long time ago, I think, but it's up for sale.
Why? Don't tell me things like that. I have too many cars. You need to buy a few of these Civics I have projects. Make you a track car.
Well, I figure if you go out and buy another one and it takes you some time to get used to it, then I don't have to worry about you for at least one of them or something.
Luckily I've resisted getting a CRX. Somebody had a clean one here for $1,500. I'm like, all of Wong's old stuff could just bolt into that. I was like, do not do that. Do not do that. Do not allow myself to do that. Stick with what I have a little bit of experience with.
Yeah.
So everybody, there's also Miatas for sale. I'll drive yours if you get one sometime, just since I've never driven one. It'd be interesting to see how different they are. But, yeah. Thinking Civic.
I'm not the greatest Miata driver. I don't know. They don't. I don't do well with left-foot braking a Miata. They like to lock tires all over the place, and it takes a little different animal to drive one of those things than me. If there's one thing I'm not very good at, it's like a slow Miata driver. I'm not good at that.
And that's a great tip right there. If you've listened to this interview and gone, okay, I'm a left foot brake, it may not work in your platform. It might be that you need to talk to someone that's fast in that platform to figure out how their car's set up, if that's going to be good or not.
Right. I mean, a Miata, if you try to drag the brakes, to the apex in a Miata, you're going to go straight off in the grass. I mean, that car braking and turning, they do not do the two things well together. That car, if you can just dab the brakes, carry all the speed you want into the corner, it'll take it every time. But if you try to brake and turn at the same time, you're going straight off the course. Yeah, it's a really, really odd thing, but that's the animal that the Miata is, and some people can really, really drive them fast. I'm just not one of them.
So now I've got to drag you into the S2000. Have you driven some of those, and are they similar or are they different?
I've never driven an S2000, so people don't let me drive their cars very often.
Ron's a nice guy. He's just going to drive it really fast, most likely, whatever it is. So I would get him in there and sit next to him. But the STR S2000 I drove, I feel like I'm not fast, and I think from what you just said in the Miata, I don't think I'd throw enough speed into the turns. I think I try to drive it like a Civic, and it's not quite the same.
Right, yeah. Yeah, and, it takes a couple of events to learn that type of thing, on some of those cars. Like I said, it took me I had a Miata for a very short period of time, and I learned it over a couple of events that, man, left foot braking and that car just don't like to mix unless you literally have to get a little bit of braking done before you ever even turn the wheel, and then just roll the car into the turn, and it's going to hook. I mean, they've got tons of mid-corner grip. You just can't be touching the brakes or it'll just go straight. And the difference is you could be braking and turning and going 15 miles an hour slower, and you'll still go straight off the course than what the car rolls through the corner. Yeah, it's just really strange, but kind of the experience I had with them now. So,
I'm over here laughing, trying to keep the laughing from being recorded. I'm like, wowzers, that's great to know. Just good information there for what you've, coming from front-wheel drive experience, going, hey, this is not the same.
No, two different animals, yeah.
Well, Ron, thanks again for all the time. It's been great. And once again, yes, I will see you here shortly.
All right, Kim, thanks a lot.
Hey, it was great. It was fun. And everybody, once again, check him out for, if you have something car-wise related, hey, he helped me out, went through my car. I highly recommend checking him out, talking to him when you see him. And also, if you have a chance to get him to drive your car or ride with you, I would highly suggest it. Thanks for listening. For the show notes and contact information, please visit autocrosstalk.com. There you can also subscribe so that we can keep you up to date on new shows as they come out. Also, please leave us a review on iTunes and subscribe on iTunes for the upcoming shows. You can connect to our Facebook page at facebook.com/autocrosstalk. You can share your thoughts, your insights, your questions, your suggestions there. Also share with your friends. Hopefully you found it entertaining and motivating, and hopefully other people will as well. It's been fun, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for listening, and check back next week for the next show.